Hey everybody, Mr. Regan here, and today we're going to be looking at our final sim question where we have to analyze how objects changed before and after they were hit. So if we're looking at our question here, we need to decide which of our three objects, A, B, and C, experienced the strongest force when hit. Our options are obviously object A experienced the strongest force, B or C experienced the strongest force based on how their velocity changed. So when we look at analyzing our diagrams here, we're going to see a lot of things. First and foremost, we have our objects A, B, and C with our starting velocity. And after they were hit, we can clearly see that their velocities changed. Now, object A, B, and C, when we look down here, all have different masses. Object A, the first object, has a mass of 2 kilograms. B has a mass of 1. C has a mass of 0.5. So object A is the heaviest. B has the medium mass. C is the lightest. So each of our objects now have different masses. And when we look at how their velocity changed over here in the diagram, we can see that object A had a velocity of 6, and then it changed after it was hit to a velocity of 4. So it changed by 2. Object B, on the other hand, had a velocity of 3. After it was hit, it had a change of 1. So our velocity for object B changed by 2 as well. And last but not least, we have object C. Object C had a starting velocity of 1. After it was hit, it had a velocity of -1, so it changed by 2 as well. So if you notice, we have our three different objects with their masses, A being the heaviest, all the way down to C being the lightest. We have our starting and ending velocity with their change. A slowed down, B slowed down, and C changed direction, each one changing their velocity by 2. Your job is to decide which one experienced the strongest force. Take a second, select object A, B, and C, A, B, or C. Pause the video, come back to it when you're ready to go over the answer. All right. Do you think you got it? Let's go ahead and take a look. So it's important to know that if the same strength force is exerted on two objects, but the objects have different masses, the object with less mass will have a greater change in velocity. So we know that if we apply the same force to three different objects with masses that are different, our lighter object will move faster, our heavier object will move slower. But when we look at our answers here, and when we look at what's happening, we see a different story. We see that all of our objects actually change their velocity by the same amount. So they didn't experience the same force because we don't see a difference in their velocity change. So we got to kind of work backwards here. We got to think about how does the mass apply to the velocity change. So if each of the objects here change their velocity the same by 2, 6 to 4 is 2, 3 to 1 is 2, 1 to 1 is 2, how did our objects experience different forces? And more importantly, which one experienced the strongest force? The key here is to think about the mass. Which object would take more force or a stronger force to change their velocity? We know that heavier objects require more force. We know lighter objects require less force. That's why when we look at our key concept, we know that lighter objects will change their velocity more when experiencing the same force. So if all of our objects experience the same change, 2, 2, 2, that means that object A, our heavier object, needed more force if they were going to change their velocity the same as object B and the same as object C. In other words, object C doesn't need as much force because it's lighter. Object B might need a little bit more force because it's a little heavier, but object A is going to need the strongest force or the most amount of force if it's going to have the same velocity change. So this is like changing a golf ball, a bouncy ball, and a ping pong ball. They're all slightly heavier or lighter than all the others, but if we change the velocity the same, that means the heavier object needs more force, a stronger force. And we can see that when we run our sim. When we ran our sim, we can see that object A needed a force of 40 in order to change its velocity to 2, by 2, excuse me, versus object B only needed 20 to change its velocity by 2. And object C only needed a force of 10 to change its velocity by 2. So our heavier object needs more force to have the same velocity change. Object B needs a little less, and object C needs the smallest or the weakest force to change its velocity by 2. So our best answer here is going to be object A for our answer. If this is confusing or if you have questions, make sure you reach out. Otherwise, this is the end of our review. Hopefully we did well. If you have questions, reach out. Otherwise, we're done.